All right, this week we are talking about the typography project. So once again, you should have already looked through the presentation, ideally the one that I narrated for you. And now I'm taking the inspiration that's in my head and putting it down on the paper. And the first thing I'm going to be doing is placing the letters. So before you get into really stylized letters, I would suggest just doing regular line work to finalize your spacing. And now that I have my spacing figured out, I'm going to go back in and stylize the letters. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to do a block or a bubble letter. So rather than figuring this out as I go, I already have a roadmap laid down for me. Those lines that I went in with first, those are informing where the letter is going to end up. And all I'm doing really now is circling the lines that I have laid down. So I have my W, and all I'm doing is deciding how thick I want it to be and putting a line on either side of the W to create, in my case, a block letter. If you wanted bubble letters or some other sort of stylized letter, just don't have the rectangular edges, you can have rounded edges. And I do go back and I change that later on anyway. So here's my block lettering. And now that I have my placement finalized, the next thing to do is get rid of all those extra lines. So I'm going to grab my eraser and erase all the lines that I don't want. And I did, for my drawing, kind of push hard so you can see it on the camera, but I would suggest starting out with really light pressure so it's not hard for you to erase and so that you don't put an indentation on your paper with your pencil when you're drawing. And the next thing I'm doing is I have my block letters, but I think, in my opinion, these are a little bit boring. And I'm taking style inspiration from the typography presentation that I've already talked about that you should have already gone through. And I'm going to make my letters look like they're kind of liquid and dripping. So I'm going back in and I'm adding some extra curvature and I'm making it a little more irregular than just plain block letters. And again, erasing the extra lines as I go so I don't get confused. And then the other style element that I chose to pull from my inspiration was having the letters look like they're dropping in from the side, so they're kind of three-dimensional. This is a technique we're going to talk more about next week, so if you're a little confused about technical aspects of this, don't worry about it. Again, it's optional, it's just what I decided to do, but all I'm doing is taking all of the corners and the rounded edges and having them connect back to the same point in the distance. And if that doesn't make sense right now, it will next week because 1-point and 2-point perspective is the next thing we're going to be talking about. But I'm just quickly going in and finishing all my drippy looking letters and then connecting them all to the same point off in the distance. And now that I'm happy with the line work I have, I'm going to take a marker, in my case a Sharpie, and go over the lines because now they're the final lines I've decided on. And if at any point you are thinking, well, I don't have that at home, whatever you do have, you can make work. If all you have is a pencil and paper, that is absolutely okay. But I do have access to some other tools, and you might as well. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of options. But keep in mind that that is what this is. Everything is optional. The next thing I decided to do was with a thin point Sharpie, add some thin, like wavy stripes into my letters. And if you have access to a pencil and a pen, or a pencil and some Sharpies or some markers, this might be a good option for you because you don't have to have color to make a finished piece. At this point, I could call it good. I could take my pencil and shade in the background of the letters that's extending off the page, but I have chosen to add some color. So another option is to go ahead and add some color. So I'm filling in my letters with this purple marker, and I'm taking care to shade carefully and not leave a whole bunch of gaps. The camera did make it look like at the end there's some white gapping. We go back and we take care of that later, so don't worry just yet. And then the next thing that I chose to do was take some colored pencils and shade in the background of the letters. And notice here I go in one direction and then switch directions and go in the other direction to avoid as much of that white space being left behind as I can. And then what I decided to do next was blend some colors. So I wasn't super happy with the purple marker. I took a red colored pencil and I changed that color to match the background color a little bit better. And I'll finish the rest off camera in a little bit. And then I looked at the background and there was some area that I wasn't super happy with the color. So I took a different color and I'm actually going to blend a gray colored pencil over the top of a few of these sections just to make it a little more toned down, a little more blended together. And here's my final color that I ended up with. And then could call it good, but what I'm going to do is cut out all the white space. So if you choose to do this, what I would recommend to get accurate cutting is don't turn the scissors, turn the paper when you're cutting. So this paper is what's steering, the scissors are just opening and closing to cut on the line. And that, I'm going to speed through here really quickly to get my final product. And I decided to leave mine like this. I liked it not being a rectangle, but another option would be to grab another piece of paper, maybe with a different drawing on it, or in this case, just a colored piece of paper, and slap it on there with some glue. There you have another option. So I really want to see what you all come up with. Don't feel like you have to make your letters look like mine. Reference that PowerPoint. I'm so excited to see what you all come up with. Thanks, guys.